The caterhamracer.com America's Road Trip is sponsored by DPR Motorsport, your competitive advantage. By Design and Display Structures, immerse yourself in worlds beyond with bespoke projection screens. And by Just Add Lightness, high-performance LED lights and accessories for the Caterham 7. We're also supported by Darren Burke, Performance Driver Coach, and by FPZero Simulators. So, the second biggest evening of this fourth season of caterhamracer.com, Caterham Esports Racing. This is a crucial one because this tonight will determine the last few places on the grid for the grand final next week. This has been the America's Road Trip. We've had 4 qualifying heats and 12 drivers have already booked their spots onto the grid for the Mont Tremblant race in 7 days' time. But to fill the grid, we have to find 6 more places. This is where the Last Chance Saloon race comes in. We've got 18 drivers here who, whether they've competed or not, haven't made it through from the automatic qualifying places and therefore have to use tonight as their last chance to book a spot to join the 12 fellow qualifiers to do that. And of course, there are some drivers here who have maybe strategically chosen not to race in the heats and wait until the Last Chance Saloon to give themselves the best possible chance. But at the same time, they know it's only one single shot, because if it doesn't work out for them, that's it, they're not in the grand final. We'll work out who they are and who to expect at the front. But as always, once again, it's Scott Woodwiss and Chris Hutchinson back in the commentary box once more. And we should also talk about where we are, because those who are knowledgeable enough and eagle-eyed will know that we are one of the best circuits in the US, and some will argue that, some will not, but I think it's superb. It is WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca in Monterey, California. It's been the home of Indy cars and ALMS and American sports cars for ages, and some people even must have even suggested and campaigned that they should have been the host of the US Grand Prix, but Bernie and co didn't really cave into their demands. But there has been an F1 car that set a lap record around here in the hands of Ricardo Zonta, a Toyota, and he did pretty well indeed. I think it was snatched back by an IndyCar at one stage. But Chris, we're here tonight, of course, to settle who are the final 6 drivers that will move up into the grand final here tonight. And as I mentioned, there are some who've been a little bit sneaky here and decided they're going to wait until what may have anticipated being easier opposition. That's not been disingenuous to those who are here by virtue of not qualifying automatically. But I think these drivers, based on the competition that we've had, might get a bit of a rude awakening if they haven't already throughout practice and the early stages here of qualifying tonight.
Yeah, that's right. Good evening, everybody. And some drivers have just had other commitments so far this year, and they haven't been able to do week in, week out, and therefore they've decided that tonight is going to be their one chance. And if they make it, great. If they don't, they don't. We can see Yaroslav Cherny on the screen now. He hasn't been part of this season so far, but has sort of done some of the general races we've been doing through the weeks, so he has been active but just not in the Caterham side of things. We've got David Rowe also here in his new resplendent DPR liveried car. He's back. He hasn't been able to join us so far this year, but has been given permission to race with us tonight, so hopefully he can gain his spot, and he's certainly been setting some good times, and you can see him up there second place at the moment with just about 10 minutes to go in this qualifying session. We've also got Anthony Cook's a new driver. He's another PT sports car series convert. He came over, he did very well in that. So he is back tonight, and he's with us for the first time tonight, and he's on the edge of that top 6. So probably looking to see whether he can have a good run. Following Hudson Knight here at the moment, and Hudson's back. So our 11-year-old, driving ace back on the server, both giving themselves room there on the screen. And various other people. Yeah, we've got Emil Jeliselix, again, hasn't been able to join us so far this season, but he is out there in his green machine flying around, and I'm sure looking to put in a good performance. So yeah, various other people. Ryan Hooker as well, another new driver for us on this grid, although he has been racing on the B grid a little bit. So we've got some of the kind of B grid regulars have actually managed to qualify onto this A grid tonight, and Ryan Hooker's one of them. He comes with a good racing pedigree. You can see his car festooned with advertising there. He does some driver coaching as well, and does some of the academy drivers work with him and various other teams and things. So Ryan Hooker's he's not without experience in a Caterham, as well as plenty of other racing cars throughout his career.
Yeah, to give you an idea of what he has done, he was karting for 6 years since 1993, and then from there he's progressed into quite an impressive CV of stuff that he's done primarily in sports cars. He was Porsche 924 champion in 2004, he was Brit Sports champion in 2005. He's also been a champion in the British GT Championship in the GTC class. He was second in 2006. Or at least it looks like it is. Yes, he was. And then He was also third in the Formula Palmer Audi Championship in 2003. He was fourth in the V2V European Series. That's like a sports prototype championship in 2009. He was then GCC champion in 2012, and he's also even been the Intermark champion for the Aston Martin Owners Club championship. Of that championship in 2019, as well as being a professional racing coach. So certainly someone who knows his stuff, and he's very prominent behind the wheel of any kind of sports car, or any car for that matter, in real life. But at the moment, just finding his feet in the virtual world here, and he's some 2.3 seconds off pole position. So it's maybe making a bit of a steady transition onto the sims, and hopefully we can see him in future races and future series getting quicker and quicker, because he's certainly, with a driver of that pedigree, and someone who deserves to be a little bit further up the front. Speaking of the front, this man you're looking at here, Will Rossetti, in his familiar Gulf-coloured Caterham. It's currently quickest by almost 0.3 per second. 1 minute 36.531 is the top time for provisional pole position. Remember, of course, it is a short session, which means that these drivers do have to try and make the most of the time that they have available. Jaroslav Cherny currently second quickest from David Rowe in third, but it's Cook in fourth position.
It's Anthony Cook, Scott.
And Anthony Cook, thank you. I'm always searching for the word, thank you. Anthony Cook, and then it's Andrew Parker, who we've talked about quite a lot in this series, and I'm sure we'll talk about again tonight in terms of how close he's been to get through. And then Tom Willis, who rounds up the top six. And then Steve Arnell has managed to push himself into fifth position at that time, and then James Fowler into sixth. And this is what we're talking about in terms of these drivers that are coming in, whether they've had commitments or not. Rossetti, Rowe, Cherney, as well, Cook in the mix as well, and this is where they're going to find maybe that not they're anticipating to get an easy race, but it's not going to be it's going to be a trickier experience than they might have thought it was initially. They might have thought it was going to be. I don't suggest for a second that any of them undermine any of the talent here that's on the grid, but if they've watched any of the previous races, knowing that the likes of Steve Arnell, James Fowler, Andy Parker, Tom Willis, and even some of the new guys like John Lang, the Knights, Jason and Hudson, all these drivers here are very capable enough, and they've really developed themselves even between seasons 3 and 4, and even gotten quicker as the series has gone on. So I think tonight there might be some outstanding favourites for some of the drivers coming in last minute who haven't raced all season in the heats. There isn't really a clear top six that we can give, because there's about at least 2/3, if not just more than that, in this field, who all either deserve a spot or have the pace to obtain one should others fall foul. It's going to be very tricky out there tonight.
Yeah, definitely. And we're looking at Steve Arnell. He's done a fairly tidy lapper so far. But he's, him and Parker have both been so close to qualifying in pretty much every round, and whether by incident or spin or whatever, they've both kind of missed out. So they've been the story of this season so far, and whether they were coming in here thinking they might have a slightly easier job to, because they, the best of the rest, as it were. Unfortunately, they have been usurped a little bit. You can see that Rossetti, Rowe and Cherney and Cook are all ahead of Arnell, and in fact Fowler's now put himself up there. So yeah, just when it does come down to this one chance left, even though there are 6 spaces, which is quite a lot of spaces left for people to qualify in, there's a lot more drivers wanting to fill those spaces than maybe we've even seen for the top 3 so far this year.
Yeah, I think that's possible. It could be potentially, even though we've got a really grandstand race being lined up for the final at Mont Tremblant, which is a fabulous circuit in itself. There's an equally brilliant location here, of course, Laguna Seca, where I'm sure we're going to get, I think if we didn't already get some great racing in the heat, I'm pretty certain tonight that the Last Chance Saloon race is going to be even more exciting, particularly when it's just that is a last chance for some of these drivers that haven't got their spot to fill up the last 6 spots on the grid. Let's just give you a reminder quickly of who already has qualified for the 4 heats. Of course, those drivers either who finished in the top 3 in the actual race, or the highest 3 placed drivers competing who hadn't already qualified. So from the first race that we had at Watkins Glen, it was James Murphy, Christian Zaruta and Blair McConaughey. They were the first qualifiers. Then we had from the second race into Lagos, our only South American spot on the calendar, we had Jensen Hassler from Mark Bennett and then Guy Crawford. Then our next race was the first of the 2 road circuits, Road Atlanta. See what I did there? And that was Paul Fernhoff, Richard Gallagher and Chris Skillicorn. And then last time out at Road America, we had Alistair Gregg, and I think it was his first time out. He managed to put himself as the highest qualifying driver alongside Steve McMaster and Tom McEwing. But there were drivers that we look back at who definitely should have been in the mix there. And one, of course, has been, as you say, Andy Parker and Steve Arnell. So those guys would be very determined to try and make a point here and use this last chance, because they've had 4 chances to get through, and for one reason or another, they've either thrown it away, or they've had issues, they've dropped down the pack, they've had contact that wasn't, maybe could have been or wasn't their fault. So they've got quite a lot to work on tonight. The circuit itself, 2.236 miles in length. It is one of the most fantastic of circuits, not just in the US, but in the entirety of world motorsport. It is a very unique challenge. The kind of turn one is a very flat out corner. You head down to the Andretti hairpin, then the sequence of long corners, which you can take quicker than it actually looks on here. But then the tricky points are definitely going to be one of the most well-known corners in world motorsport, which is, of course, Chris, up at turn 7, 8 and 8A, the corkscrew. The approach is tricky, but the descent as you go through it is very unique. You get, I remember Nigel Mansell described that you get, I think you get sort of positive, then negative, then positive G, all in the space of about 1.5 seconds, which is quite a thing to experience. But lots of long flowing corners, a couple of big stops in there as well, and the corkscrew. This is, it's no understatement when I say this, this is a good circuit to race when you get it right, but also not a circuit to play around with when you don't know your way around or have a bad lap, because this is not a circuit that is polite to newcomers, those who haven't driven it very much. It's incredibly tough for the more advanced drivers.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's what we're going to see dust flying. You know, the desert sort of comes right up to the edge of the tracks, and it's so easy to sort of miss an apex. As we saw Ben Maskell there missing an apex, but he just about keeps it in bounds. But as soon as you start pushing on this, you can easily lose time by just drifting off wide. So real balancing act. It's also extremely easy to lose the back end of this car around this track. You will see massive oversteer moments at times as we go on through this evening. So yeah, watch out for people losing that rear end, and if they lose it in at the wrong time, if you lose it going into the corkscrew, and you could end your race plus another 4 cars behind you. There are overtaking opportunities though. There's plenty of space. It's quite a wide track, and again, because the corners leading into some of the straights are so tricky, we will see manoeuvres. But what we won't see, whereas in sort of Road America last time out, there were nice clean manoeuvres where you could shove your car up the inside and dominate that corner. A lot of these corners are so wide and flowing that we're going to see that side-to-side action that we've been seeing in the early part of this year. And again, we see that all that does is bunch up the pack. So fingers crossed they can all be sensible at the tight and pinch points, and as we're going up sort of towards the corkscrew, that definitely funnels down, and it's not a place to lose your braking point, that's for sure. But yeah, so fingers crossed they can keep it under control. But yeah, watch for running wide, watch for dust, and watch for those rear ends being very loose this week, this evening.
And that might mean that some drivers might not have the clearest amount of vision when they've got dust flying up in their face, but it is one of those quirks of Laguna Seca and one of the quirks of the circuit itself. Just coming towards the end of the qualifying session with about 20 seconds to go, Will Rossetti still has provisional pole position, which will turn into confirmed pole position within the next 15 seconds if he can hold on. I think that's pretty much his last flying lap, if not the one that he's last proper one. He might go for another one to secure the pole time as he heads into the Andretti hairpin. It's a very tricky braking zone after the flat-out left-hander over the crest at turn 1. There's Jaroslav Černý on his final lap. Little twitch, but just enough that it wasn't going to slow him down. And he's currently sat 4th fastest. The top 6 cars are covered by just over 0.3 of a second, so quite a bit to go. It's quite incredibly close between all the top 6 places that will secure the last 6 spots on the grand final grid. Any drivers outside of that might need to get a move on and might struggle a bit tonight, although they are looking quite close in the times, given that the top 11 is covered by less than a second. You've got Steve Arnell in 7th place, Emil Jaselik in 8th, who's in the pit lane, so he's not going to make another lap. John Lang is 9th, Tom Willis down in 10th. So, and Alan Curtis as well, another one who's been moving up and down the order, back in 12th position. So quite a bit to do here as we see Jaroslav Černý just move his way through the corkscrew, using all the curb he can, now through the long left-hander downhill of Rainey Corner, named after motorcycle racer Wayne Rainey. And they head into the right-hander before the final corner. This is one of the overtaking spots if you can line it up right. If not, it's the crucial run out of here that you want up through turn 1 and then up towards the Andretti hairpin to possibly make a move. That'll be one of the key overtaking spots if we can hold on to it. Černý comes across the line. Can he improve on 4th place in this final flying lap? And the answer is no, he can't, because that last lap was it flashed off my screen. That's Will Rossetti. That's his final flying lap, and he isn't going to beat it anyway, but he looks like to be secure on pole position, and he will be starting a last chance race from the very front of the grid. Ryan Hooker and Freddie Chilix has yet are just the last couple of cars out on track, as also was Ryan Hooker, and he's coming into the pits as well, and he's found start from towards the rear of the grid. So, qualifying over, The grid is now set for tonight's 25-minute Last Chance Saloon race here at Laguna Seca, and it's Will Rossetti on pole position by nearly 0.2 of a second from James Fowler in second place. Row 2 are two old sparring partners from the previous seasons, David Rowe and Jaroslav Cherny, who fought very hard for the title in Season 2. Then it's Andrew Parker and Anthony Cook looking to make an impact. Andy Parker, of course, all eyes may be on him, given the fact that he has now lost out on in the first 4 races in the heats to make it through. This is literally his last chance to make it through and get a top 6 place. Anthony Cook alongside him on his debut was second in the PT Sports Cars Championship, making the most of his pace. And Steve Ardell and Emma Jaselinks come next from Tom Willis and John Lang, running at the top 10. And then it's Jason Knight and Alan Curtis from Ben Haskell and Jay Shepherd. And then it's Hudson Knight and Ryan Hooker for Freddie Chiddicks and Jim Earlham, rounds out the 18-car grid. So, brief countdown here before the red lights will come on. And this is going to be quite intense. I would ask for a prediction, Chris, but I suspect that given the fact we've got so many good drivers in here, and I think, truthfully, I mean, anyone from at least the top 12, or realistically anyone from the grid could possibly get through, depending on what happens tonight. This is going to be quite an interesting scenario here. Oh, we've got some time until the race starts anyway, so this is going to be a very interesting race, given the fact that there really is, as there has been in the heats to a certain extent, there's no guarantee as to exactly who can make it through. I honestly, hand on heart, I can't call who's going to get these top 6 spots, because there are so many good drivers that either have the ability to keep themselves out of trouble or at least have the pace to take one. This is going to be, hopefully in a nice way, this is going to be a bit of a free-for-all tonight to get these positions, and it really is going to be survival of the fittest.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many unknowns as well. Cherney coming in, Rowe coming in for the first time, a bit race rusty maybe. But equally, you know, the Fowler putting it right up there with Will Rossetti, and Arnell just outside those qualifying spots at the moment. So he's obviously going to be thirsty to get there. I think tonight's going to be one for the consistent drivers. So I'm not sure. It's hard call. I think we've seen Will Rossetti sort of fall back through the races. And will that happen again tonight? It's such a hard call. I'm kind of gunning for Parker and Arnell. They've tried so hard and been on the sort of verge each time. And you know, with these 6 spots, you've got to imagine they can do it. But whether by hook or by crook, they've got to sort of cut out their errors. I'm going to call this a Cherney win. That's what I'm going to say.
Cherney does seem to put himself into a position where he's able to work his way up into the lead and then pull away. But it all depends on the start that he can get. And he's usually pretty decent off the line where he can get a decent getaway. I'm intrigued by David Rowe's livery. Is that a bit of a sneak peek of what DPR are playing for their liveries this year? Do you know, is that insider info?
That's
but
right,
we'll talk about that as the race goes on, because with the red lights are about to come on. So 6 more spots left for the grand final here in the Last Chance Saloon race. A lot of drivers very capable of taking it. We're all set to get racing at Laguna Seca, and we are go. Strong start from Rossetti, but he gets wheel spin in the second phase, slotting into second phase behind him. Looks to be, I think that's possibly, Andy Parker's in 5th position. James Fowler's in there, side by side in 3rd place between Rowe and Cherney, and diving up the outside goes Anthony Cook as they turn into Andretti hairpin for the first time. And now, as we see, looks like they're all getting through, fingers crossed, clean. I thought as much, but I thought they were going to get through clean. A bit of a tangle towards the back, and looks like Jay Shepherd and possibly Hudson Knight were involved in that. But that was right towards the rear, so thankfully for the most part, the majority of them, everyone got through the first few corners fairly unscathed, but it is Rossetti who leads. Cherney is up to 2nd place, so making the most of that good start that we anticipated he would get. Fowler into 3rd place, Rowe in 4th, then it's Parker 5th, Arnell 6th, and it's Cook who's been shuffled down to 7th. There's a battle going on between Emma Jaselinks and John Lang for 8th and 9th place, and then Tom Willis rounding out the top 10 with Jason Knight on his tail. Now they come up through turn 6 and up the Rahal straight towards the corkscrew for the first time. Is anyone going to be dare enough to possibly try and make a move? Anyone who does is brave enough to make an attempt, but they might sit back for the moment. Under brakes and just over the curbing as they head for the corkscrew. And look at this sight, 18 Caterham 420Rs plunging their way down the corkscrew. There was side by side there between old mates Steve Arnell and Andy Parker, and not anymore it isn't, because Anthony Cook makes collision with Steve Arnell. I'm not sure that Cook realised that Arnell was still to his outside, but a pair of them have come to blows, and that is 2 drivers, Chris. They've had their chances take a very early nosedive.
Yeah, they've taken a nosedive, and Arnell has fallen a long way back through the field, so he is going to be on a tough one to come back, and there was just a clash of wheels which sort of sent everyone spiralling, and so yeah, I think you're right, they may not have been aware that he was still there. But this front 5, therefore, has sort of broken away gently ahead of John Lang in 6th place. So It's been an interesting start. I thought there might be some issue, and we have seen it. And let's see whether Arnell can make it back, but it's not looking good at this point, is it?
Yeah, it has got quite a task from 17th. He's only got about 6/10 over Jay Shepherd, but he's got some 22 3/4 minutes to try and claw his way back as best he can, and it's some of these things are better to happen in some cases on the first lap than it is later on in the race when things are more spread out. But whether he can claw his way back up into a top 6 spot, it's not impossible, but it's a very tall order for him to try and make that happen. So on board with Jaroslav Černý, as we said, we're anticipating him to get a good start, and he's done just that. He's now on the tail of Will Rossetti as they come up through turn 6 under the bridge. Now up the Rahal straight, he's getting a good tow here. Of course, he's within that magic half a second range. Just for a reminder, it's for in a Seto course, these cars get a tow when you're within half a second of the car in front. It's a bit like DRS, only there's no wing. So as over through the corkscrew, there was a bit rough there from Rossetti, was offline over the curbs, and that's giving Černý a chance to close back in a little closer as they come out of the rainy corner and now towards the final few turns to end the second lap through turn 10, and Černy's all over the back of Rossetti here, and I reckon, Chris, if he's not going to try it on the run down towards the pit straight, it might be the next few corners we could see Černý making a move for the lead. It's possible.
Yeah, I said before the race we sometimes see a bit raggedy from Will Rossetti, and since the corkscrew you saw him drift wide, and now he has had to give up the inside. Černý, the wily character's sort of held him up to the inside of the final corner, and now has got the inside for the Andretti hairpin at the top here. Will Rossetti does leave it long on the brakes coming out, but he's going to have to give up that place as Černý tucks it in nicely. So a great move there, and Černý has now moved from 5th on the grid to the lead, and behind him it's looking like David Rowe and Fowler are kind of building up their battle for that 3rd and 4th. But again, they can only lose out at the moment. They're in that top 6, comfortably in that top 6, and obviously they'll be thinking about that even this early, even still with 21 minutes to go. They'll start be thinking, whether there's any risk or reward coming on here, with Andy Parker sort of quickly catching up there in 5th place as well.
I'm hoping we haven't kind of possibly picked it up as a very dramatic race, because if everyone decides to just stick in the top 6 positions, it'll be all the fighting, even as good as it will be outside the top 6 to decide who is best of the rest from those who don't qualify. So I hope there is some kind of action here, as David Rowe might want to try and pick up another place here to be a bit more secure. But the top 6, you're absolutely right, Chris, they have pulled away pretty substantially to the rest of the field. They've got a tune of about 1.9 to almost 2 seconds over this man, Edward Jacelink's in 7th place. Tom Willis is back in 8th, and it's Jason Knight 9th, and Ryan Hooker's come up well from me. He started about 15th on the grid, up 5 places to 10th. So the former British GT class champion is up into 10th place and looking to try and make a few more moves as we look at Edward Jacelink's here in the old school Caterham / sort of Team Lotus style colours, which were around when the Lotus / Caterham team ran in Formula 1 from 2010 to 2014. Jaroslav Černý with the fastest lap of the race now, 1:36.576. Now that he's in clear air to be able to make the most of that, and David Rowe's not afraid to make a move for 3rd place. He goes to the outside of James Fowler, and he sticks it right around the outside of the Andretti hairpin, and I think he's going to make the stick because he will have the inside line for turn 3. The 2 cars go side by side on the sprint towards the right-hander, but the DPR Motorsport boss has just lost in front, and I have to say, we're not just saying it's because they're the sponsor. That was a heck of a move from David Rowe down the outside. It's not an easy move to make, but David Rowe, with all his experience in the sim and these cars, hats off to him. That was a brilliant move. Yeah,
it gets dusty out there as well. So you're relying very much. James Fowler did a great job of letting that manoeuvre happen. Again, he's got a lot to lose as well, so that helps. But yeah, what a brilliant move around the outside of that corner. Obviously it is possible, but it's quite a rare move to see, and obviously he just puts himself in quite a stressful position now coming up to the corkscrew. He's got an angry mob of cars coming home. You can see Andy Parker has closed that gap up now, really really close, those 3, and this is what we want to see, because they will want to protect their place from the squad of cars that are looking to take those top 6 spots that are coming up behind them. And because we're still early in the race, that little gap that appeared between the top 6, I think that's going to disappear.
And what is disappearing are the chances, I think, I'm afraid, of Edward Jacelink's as well, because he's dropped right the way down to the tail of the field within this incident. And Tom Willis has also lost a few spots as well, so I suspect maybe the pair of them have made some kind of contact, and because of that, it's just the Belgian that's come off worse. So he's down to the bottom of the field, and I'm afraid his one and only chance to get through into the grand final doesn't look like it's really come off. Černý with another new fastest lap of the race. He's lowered the best time by 1/10 of a second to a 1:36.4. He's now got a gap of 1.4, 1.5 seconds over Rossetti. Rowe is now trying to get away in third position. For fourth, however, this is the scrap that's going on. James Fowler and Andrew Parker. And Parker's managed to get a good run here. So maybe it looks like Fowler's going to lose as many, 2 places as many laps, provided he can fight back here at turn 3, which he does. But Andy Parker here must be a lot going through his mind here, not just getting caught up in the race, but he must have on his mind the fact that he's gone through all 4 of the heats and been in such a position to potentially make it through as a guaranteed spot here. But he knows this is his last chance. He tries to go down the outside into turn 5. And even though it is his last chance, he's not taking it risk-free, is he? He's going for it and deciding if he's going to get through, he's going to do it on his terms rather than sitting back and just comfortably taking a spot. He is not lying down here.
Racer's going to race. I think that's what we come out of this. But another great move around the outside there. James Fowler, I think, again, very, very mindful himself that there's nothing to be lost or gained here. So why not let Andrew go? Andrew has been provably fast. So, but every time they do this, we saw it on our last time out at Road America, it is a risk. If you go side by side, there can be a little twitch. You can lose the rear end. You have to put a lot of trust in the drivers around you. And it says something that they do trust each other enough to do that and come away and race another corner. You know, they are still absolutely here. John Lang is looking like he's next to sort of chase that down with, and it looks like John Knight is now the chaser. So whereas Emil Jesselink was previously chasing down, it looks like it's now John Knight's turn, and he's got Ryan Hooker just behind him.
Yes, Jason makes his way out the final corner onto the pit straight, and I think you've got a point with James Fowler in that it looks as though he's being a little bit more conservative and deciding, look, if people want to come past me, as long as I'm still in the top 6, that's all that matters. He is having a bit of a scrap here defending for John Lang, because I think he's determined he doesn't want to lose 3 places in as many laps at the same corner, so he's trying to be a bit more defensive here. But I think there will come a point when he will realise that as long as he doesn't keep dropping back too much and just maintains a consistent spot in 6th, he should be relatively safe, touch wood, even though there is 16 minutes to go. John Lang does pull to the outside here, up towards turn 5. Fowler has got the defensive line, but I suspect that Lang will try and put that a little bit later to hold the grip around the outside through the left-hander. Fowler just squeezes him out, and Lang just puts 2 wheels onto the curb, so then he's going to try again on the sprint into turn 6. Now up the rail straight again. He's right tucked underneath the roll cage here. He's a brave man to make a pass into the roll cage. We said it's roll cage, into the corkscrew. He's tucked underneath the roll cage, that's why. But he's making the move into the corkscrew. Oh, this is an Ardeen Herter 96, isn't it? Indy cars, but he just about made it stick. None of them had to go off the circuit to do that one. So down to 6th position has gone James Fowler. But like you said, Chris, I suspect that he's playing a long game. He realises there's still 15 minutes to go. He's in a top 6 place. Just if anyone's going quicker, that means as long as he stirs in that top 6, he can let the rest go to a certain extent. Although John Lang has just made a small mistake, which has let James back through. But he'll simply just want to sit there and take one of the qualifying spots and not into too many dramas. Although I expect John Lang wants someone to play with rather than just someone to pass and pull away from.
Yeah, it's endlessly fascinating to me the kind of the thought processes and the mind games that go into this and the different personalities of drivers. You get it in real life and you get it in a sim. It's the different drivers react to different situations, in their own special way, and you get to know your fellow competitors and work out what is best for each situation. And you've really got to think about that long game. Some drivers definitely just think about the next corner and that's all that's on their mind, whereas other drivers are a little bit wily and think sort of longer term than that.
So just having a quick view back to the cars behind the top 6, it's Jason Knight in 7th place. Ryan Hooker's come through pretty well in 8th position, showing that he's got quite a decent amount of race pace in these cars. And Anthony Cook has dropped down to 9th after his first lap collision with Steve Varnell, who in turn, actually, we should mention, has managed to claw his way back up to 11th place. So he's not I wouldn't say he's totally out of it. He's made some decent progress from the place positions that he's managed to pick up. He's picked up 6 places since we last saw him. And here he is up through turn 6. His next target is going to be to try and get onto the back of Ben Maskell to get into the top 10. Of course, we know that's not going to be enough to get him a qualifying spot, but as we've seen, not everyone's immune from making mistakes. So hope's not totally gone for him. It was significantly made more difficult when he did have that contact with Cook right here at the Inchester rainy corner. But now that he has managed to get himself some clear air and some quick laps, it's possible. It's difficult, but not impossible for him to get through. He'll need some some good luck on his part and some bad luck from the cars in front if he wants to make any progress. But at the moment, the luck appears to be all with these top 6, particularly these two, who continue to scrap but look pretty safe with 5th and 6th at the moment.
If Jason does catch up to this pack, that's when things will start getting more interesting for the drivers like Steve Arnell a bit further down, although he is, so the drivers a little bit further down will have more of an incentive, because if Jason can catch up, he becomes the cat amongst the pigeons and really will start to stir this up. These two will actually either have to start complying with each other, or if they what was more likely to happen is they'll start getting a bit more desperate with their overtakes and their moves. So yes, and at that point you can have 3 drivers immediately take themselves out, so anything can still happen, and we've seen in previous rounds that it really has happened quite often, but that certainly the front of this race looks settled. Cherney, Rossetti, Rowe, they've all got sort of comfortable gaps between themselves and probably feeling pretty smug right now until they make their mistakes. So let's see whether that happens a bit further into this race. We've got still 12 minutes to go, so just under halfway done, and just over halfway done, under halfway to go. So we see John Lang there drifting wide, so you can see how quickly things can change, and there is Jason getting ever closer in his Nightmobile.
And we should say, even Brisbane, I'll say it very carefully, Andy Parker is in 4th position at the moment. He's 1.2 seconds back behind David Rowe. Of course, we've still got half the race to go also, but he's just going to try and keep it as secure as he can. I think if he can make it through, and it's still a case of if, because of course, whilst he has got definitely the pace to get through, it's not over until he crosses the line and secures that spot. He'll want to make sure that he just keeps out of trouble. I don't think he'll go for a pass to David Rowe unless he feels there's a realistic chance to make it happen, or B, he has no choice if Rowe's made a mistake and open up the door if he's made a mishap and lost several seconds. So that's going to be key for Andy to try and work out how he wants to run this race. He would love to be on the podium or to win it, but I think for him, all that matters right now, given the fact he's been so close race after race, Chris, he just wants to qualify. That's all he wants to do, and just prove that he can get through. And I think, again, if he can stay here for the next 12 minutes or so, 11 minutes or so, and just make it happen, he will get through. He just needs to literally just keep it on the road, keep out of trouble, which is easier said than done in this series, and he can get himself through. I think he can do it, because he's still got 11 minutes to make that happen.
The monkey on his back this year so far for Andrew has been not his pace at all. It has just been the fact that he's thrown it away, if not twice, 3 times out of qualifying position, all by himself. So not with the aid of others. It's just been a mistake, an outbreak. Having said that, that has often been when he's been chasing down the lead. So he has been, wanting to catch up and therefore pushing extra hard. He's now in a situation where he doesn't have to do that, and he's definitely a character that will have the wider game plan sorted. So he will not be doing anything to put David under any pressure to make him have any mistakes. He'll keep this nice, consistent gap. So David knows that he can take his natural line, be as quick as he can without any pressure from him behind, because they just all want to make it through to this qualifying position.
And I suspect, because we know that Andrew works with one of our supporters, which is Darren, Burke, performance driver coach. I'm sure he would have been working with him maybe between last week and this week, working on a little bit of race pace in terms of consistency to make sure he can put in quick lap times, but to make sure that he's keeping it consistent. He's trying to iron out all the errors and squeeze out every last drop of performance that he can in order to make that happen. And as we see here, Steve Arnell's trying to squeeze his way past Ben Maskell to get himself into 10th position, which he has. So up into the top 10 goes Steve. His next target is going to be Ryan Hooker, who has lost a spot to Anthony Cook, who's been on the comeback charge after his first lap contact with Steve Arnell. So interesting that Steve will soon come a cropper on the man that rather unintentionally, I guess, but rather rudely shoved him out onto the grass, onto the dirt on lap 1. But he's a decent comeback so far. But as we said, if he wants a chance at the top 6, he needs some good fortune on his part and some bad fortune on the cars in front if he wants to actually claw himself into a spot where he can qualify himself for the grand final next week, which looks like at the moment, as the race gets into its closing stages and we lose time minute by minute, it's looking ever more difficult and impossible, and improbable. Not impossible, but becoming more and more improbable as the race goes on.
Yeah, that's right. So we should be keeping an eye on Jason Knight's there in 7th place, the gap to the cars in front. And it was coming down to 2.5 seconds, but it's just gone out to over 3. So he's obviously lost out at some point in his charge to try and catch up. So that's looking less likely a thing that's developing. And you can see that the guys in front now have a nice 3-second gap from 6th back to the 7th. So everyone out front is comfortable and knows it. And behind, we've got some, battles that are developing, but none closer than this one on track at the moment, with Ryan closing down on Anthony Cook, or Anthony pulling away there, but with Arnell hot on their tails as well, looking to close all these gaps up and see whether they can force the issue. Obviously, if anything does happen out front, they do want to be in that best of the rest sort of position, so that that they have they'll pick up the pieces if they're only dropped.
Just keeping an eye on the gaps at the moment. I noticed that Cook was lapping on Steve Arnell was lapping on the same pace as Anthony Cook in 8th position. So he's going to try and work his way onto the back of Ryan Hooker as quick as he can, because Ryan Hooker's last lap was a 1:38, whereas Cook and Arnell were both in the low 1:37s. So Steve Arnell then, I'm sure, will be on the back of Ryan Hooker, I would say, within the next lap or lap and a half, and he hasn't got Ben Maskell too far away from him, even though he has pulled away already in a lap or so, to the tune of about 2 seconds, so he's got some more work to do. As for Jaroslav Cherny, well, he's been able to keep a consistent gap here at the front of about roughly 2 seconds. I noticed the last couple of laps it's hovered around 2.1, 2.2, so it looks as though I think either Cherny decided that rather than go all out, I suspect he's not running at 100% pace. Either that, or Rossetti he is, and Rossetti's just that quick enough to be equal in terms of his running. Look at the lap times. I think Cherny's only lapping as quick as he needs to, because it's 1:36.7 for Cherny, 1:36.8 for Rossetti, but the timing is, it looked like it was within 1/10 of a second in terms of those laps, so it's looking pretty strong for those two. Comfortable out in the lead. David Rowe has got a fairly comfortable gap of 1.2 seconds. I say fairly because there's always a chance that Andy could close in, but Andrew Parker doing everything he needs to, fingers crossed, to get himself in, with 6.5 minutes to go. And then our last two qualifying spots, of course, from the top 6 are still John Lang and James Fowler, and John has managed to pull away from James now, and that gap is 3.2 seconds between James and Jason Knight, which means that he is safe at the moment. But as we talked about, he was the one we need to keep an eye out for, as you rightly pointed out, Chris, is that if anything happens to especially either of these two, he's the main benefactor behind a few seconds back, and it only takes a small slip, something to get onto the onto the dirt and lose the back end. They can lose 2 or 3 seconds. That means it's a prime chance then for Jason to sweep in, and he will see that as a chance to get right onto the tail of whoever makes the mistake and possibly try and make a move. And it may even get a bit more desperate as we get to the closing couple of laps with a couple of minutes to go, but we're not quite there yet. But Jason's just pushing as hard as he can, trying to keep on pace with the cars in front, and just hoping that the rate that they both, at least one of them, comes back towards him, so that he might get a loose chance of a top 6 qualifying spot.
Yeah, Jason is one of our consistent drivers on the server. He tends to make good as the race goes on, where others fall apart around him, and you can see that he qualified, I think, around sort of 13th, 14th, maybe even a bit lower than that, and he's come all the way through to 7th place. You can see that Anthony Cook is slowly catching him up, so there is chance, but we've only got 5 minutes to go, and I'm not sure that is going to be enough, with maybe only 3 laps or so complete to actually bridge that gap. And even if he does, I don't think there's going to be anything that's going to happen to that front 6 unless they decide they're going to have some fun and games on the last few laps.
Well, I think I'm pretty confident, particularly in certain drivers' minds of the top 6, that having any fun and games, unless there really is no choice, is not really on the game plan, I don't think. They just want to make sure they can secure their spot and get through. Now, whilst we looked at this battle for 6th and 7th, and whilst we've been looking at Jason Knight in particular, Steve Arnell here has managed to work his way past Ryan Hooker, so he's now into 9th position. The next car he's going to come past is the man who, the driver he was involved with on lap 1, which was Anthony Cook. I was trying to find the right words there, in 8th position. And he's 3.2 seconds back, and they're wrapping at pretty much exactly the same pace. So I suspect, unfortunately for Steve, this is where his fight back is going to get as far as, because 9th place in terms of pace, he's on the same sort of level as Anthony at the moment. I can't envision him getting any closer with just about a couple of laps to go. So the closest battle, it seems right now, in terms of the front runners, is actually James Fowler behind John Lang, because he's less than a second back now. He's managed to gather back another 0.4 of a second since we last saw him. So I suspect we're in that phase now at the moment, as Rossetti sets the fastest lap of the race at 1:36.3. Now I suspect really that Jaroslav, while the gap is 1.6, as I've already mentioned, I think we're in that phase now where drivers simply they're doing what they need to be able to secure a top 6 spot. But if anyone who's behind someone who is in that place is in there to make a battle, they have to make a decision. Do they sit there and try and run at the same pace and risk any cars catching them in the later stages, or do they maybe try and go for it, but risk having an incident and possibly throwing away an automatic qualifying spot, which really is their last chance to get through, hence the name of the race, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I am very much of the opinion that if all that you can gain is another place, it doesn't gain you another qualifying position or anything, then the additional risk this late with 3 minutes to go is not worth it. But it doesn't look like Fowler's taking that on board, and he wants that 5th place, it looks like. So he may be jeopardising them too, especially if they, like I say, it's so easy to grab a brake or just touch the dust and have the rear end step out, and you even just get on the throttle a little bit too early. But certainly John Lang will be feeling that pressure again, with Fowler just right there, looking like he's going up onto the inside, and wonder whether John will just give him this position. No, he don't. I think they're absolutely stubborn about it. So what do I know? Racers going to be racers.
There certainly will be. Well, at least we know, Chris, what you would do in that situation. You're the more conservative type in terms of, look, if you don't have to race him, you won't race him and just take the spot. But as you say, at the same time, racers will be racers, and if there's a chance to take a position, if it's up there for this as an opportunity where it's realistic, they will take it. So certainly, I think James is going to keep on pushing him, and maybe just enjoy having a small, safe battle, hopefully, right until the end. Gap has come down again in the lead between Jaroslav Czerny and Will Rossetti. It's now 1 point. Well, it's fluctuating now between sort of 1.2 seconds now. So I suspect here that this is not Czerny just simply losing pace because he's either overheated his tyres or simply just having an issue. This is simply just him just driving the pace that he needs to run, just to effectively just about keep himself in front, keep himself out of that half a second gap range between himself and Rossetti that might give Rossetti a small toe, because Rossetti will keep on pushing because he'll want the bragging rights of winning the Last Chance Saloon race if he can. But I suspect that whether he wins it or not, I think Czerny is of that same. He's on that same approach, where simply he's in the lead, but he's not stretching a lead out to some 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds, because ultimately, Chris, he's on the similar sort of pace as Rossetti, and therefore, as long as they're way ahead of some 6.5 seconds ahead of David Rowe. So even if he loses the lead, although Rossetti's doing a good job trying to lose second place at the corkscrew by going over the curb and out braking himself. Ultimately, he's simply the approach of, even if he loses second place, he doesn't need to push hard. He's just basically just bringing the car home and taking the sensible and safe approach and just guaranteeing his spot onto the grid. But I think what might be at play here is that obviously, I was about to say literally where the order in which you qualify is where you'll start on the grid. But of course, there is going to be a regular qualifying session for the grand final. So where you finish doesn't really determine exactly what's going to happen. So looking at that times here, even though with that small mistake, Rossetti has still found another 4/10 or so. So even though he's going to go for it on this last lap, or he'll just be outside that range to make it happen, and Czerny will have played it to absolute perfection in terms of getting the gap down to just outside half a second, so that Rossetti doesn't have a chance of getting through on this last lap.
I was about to say, as we were riding on board there with Rossetti, he was driving brilliantly, curb to curb, absolutely not missing any apexes, and then just as I was about to say it, Scott, he goes and dumps it over the corkscrew and actually drifts off a little bit wide, but it didn't seem to cost him too much time, and I wonder whether there's playing for the cameras, but you can see that Rossetti is making contact with every single curb on the inside and then on the outside, absolutely on the limit, so he's definitely pushing on this final lap here, and so still yet there could be incident. Does he want to go for the win, or is he going to settle for second? I don't think Rossetti's he's one of those drivers who just likes to get in front of the car that's right in front of him.
Well, you say that, but of course, to be said, races will be races, so whether he does go for it or not remains to be seen, and he's not giving it up. He's right on the roll cage, cutting everywhere he can, taking as much curb and much kind of bit as he needs to, and he's even having a sneaky look up the inside, potentially at Rainy Corner, but I don't think he's going to be close enough. It might be a short run to the flag and a drag race between the pair of them, but I suspect that Rossetti, while he might have wanted the bragging rights for the win, he may not get it, because into the final corner, this man's done it so many times at caterhamracer.com, and he'll do it once more as he heads up to the checkered flag. He's only appeared once, but he's appeared when it counted, and these two certainly have as he comes to the checkered flag. They both weave in delight as both Jaroslav Czerny and Will Rossetti cross the line in first and second each to guarantee their spots onto the grid. David Rowe gets third place on the podium of the race, and hallelujah, he has done it. Andy Parker, he weaves with delight, and so he should. He's finally qualified. out of all of that, kept it clean and gets through, as does also John Lang and also James Fowler. They are the 6 drivers, the last 6 locked in for the grand final, and everyone else comes through. We'll just have to accept whatever result they pick up. So it's 7th for Jason Knight, one of his best results so far in this season. And Anthony Cook, a good run for his first evening in 8th position. 9th for Steve Arnell. He would have felt he could have got more, but the incident on the first lap pushed him down towards the back of the field. 10th for Ryan Hooker on his first main grid race, so good effort for him to be in the top 10. Ben Maskell 11th, Alan Curtis is 12th, and the rest of the field also coming through with Jay Shepherd and Freddie Chiddicks. Edward Sellings will be a bit disappointed after he slipped down early on. He'll come home a lowly 15th. And then there is just Hudson Knight and Jim Erlen left to come across the last 2 cars because we had Tom Willis in the pit lane. And across the line they come to finish off the 17 of the 18 cars that started. The one we didn't get across the line was Tom Willis. And that essentially means that we have got our 18 qualifiers confirmed. I've just seen here, we've got some donuts going on here at the Andretti hairpin as they're celebrating who finished where. So, Jaroslav Cherny was one of a few drivers signed to leave it late to qualify, but he has done and could be a dark horse to possibly steal something if he can pick his way up through the field. So it is Jaroslav Cherny who only just wins the Last Chance Saloon race here at Laguna Seca, and he does so by 3.5 tenths of a second from Will Rossetti. David Rowe fills out the podium in 3rd, and as we said, there'll be just relief rather than just joy or anything else for Andy Parker, because after all the mishaps he had in the 4 heats, he has finally secured a qualifying spot for the final. And that'll be just what he'll want more than anything, just to be there for the final show, see what he can do. We have to start from wherever he can in the grid. He's got some good pace. He might be a good upset and a good chance to make a good result. Then it's 5th place for John Lang and 6th place for James Fowler. And those top 6, as we say, are the final 6 qualifiers that will line up alongside the fellow 12 heat qualifiers for the grand final next week. Jason Knight finishes one of his best performances in 7th. Anthony Cook for his first race in the main grid is 8th. Steve Arnell, again, we said could have hoped for more, but he has to settle for 9th place ahead of Ryan Hooker, rounding out the top 10 with a strong first race with us for this grid. Then Ben Maskell from Alan Curtis. Then it's Jay Shepherd, Freddie Chiddicks, Emma Sellings, Hudson Knight back in 16th, and it's Jim Erlen who rounds out the 17th and final spot with Tom Willis, who didn't quite have the pace maybe we would have expected him to have, but he, I'm sure, will come back in the next series in whatever form that may take. I'm sure he'll want to try and put himself towards the front if he can. So, unfortunately, Chris, I think we maybe kind of oversold the race a little bit, because and not to be too detrimental, because I think we expect it to be quite a frantic race with so many top drivers, but the opposite happened in where the drivers simply just wanted to the drivers who are in the top 6 just wanted to mostly conserve where they were to get that position done. That's exactly what they did, and all the drama that tended to happen was, as we kind of anticipated, in some cases, was outside of the top 6, where drivers were trying to become best of the rest and be in that position where something did happen to one of the top 6 drivers, then they would have been in a prime position to pick it up. So it wasn't a race we maybe anticipated, but also at the same time, in a small way, it kind of was for other reasons, if that makes sense.
I think the race tilted when we saw Arnell have that accident with sorry, my name's all with Anthony Cook.
Anthony Cook.
So when those two hit in that midfield, it broke the field up, and that then just meant that the top 6 were just comfortable at that point. So I think it really did turn on those two making contact, because not only did it give the gap back, it also meant that the top 6 had a very slight pace advantage over that following pack, which meant that it was tricky for them to bridge it. And in fact, we saw that they couldn't make that bridge in the end. So it would have taken both Arnell and Cook to really ignite the front of that race, and really they've had an easy evening of it tonight in that top 6. But you can't blame them for just accepting their place and taking it as it comes.
No, not at all, because you have to do what you have to do to secure the place, and that's exactly what they did. So that was the all crucial bit. So congratulations, of course, to everyone who has managed to qualify. Now, looking quickly down, I was having a quick glance myself to anticipate who we might have around to have a chat to, and I can see we've got in the order here. We haven't got our race winner, but we have got 2nd and 3rd.
We'll try we'll try dragging in Will here, but he's I don't know if he has got audio. He's gone mute. Will, I don't know if you've got us in the commentary box. Yeah, I'm not sure whether he's got audio capability. Will, have you got us?
I can hear you.
Hey, I've got you, Will. Hey, how you doing? Well, how are you doing? You're qualified. It looked like you might make a challenge right at the end of that race.
Oh, it was so close, wasn't it? I needed to find that sort of consistent rhythm a little bit earlier to give Jaroslav a little bit more of a run for his money. Just a couple of scrappy laps after he got in front of me and he pulled a gap. So hard to reel him in, but I really thought last lap I was like, oh, maybe I've got a chance. So yeah, great fun.
So that gives you your qualifying position. So we will be seeing you next week. Back on the grid, it does never gets any easier, does it? So it's going to be a packed race of quite high talent. So I guess you're looking excited to get your teeth stuck into that one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we know we'll have the full complement of the super fast drivers at the front with James Murphy and Christian and no doubt many others to race in the final. But yeah, really looking forward to that and great to get the result.
Well,
today.
I think we'd put you in that super fast category. It's sometimes been just about keeping that consistent in a race, right? So there's no reason why you can't go and stick your oar in next week.
I'll give it my best shot for sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, we look forward to it. Speak to you next.
Great. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Yeah, and let's. I want to speak to Andrew Parker, so hopefully he's still there. But I'll quickly drag in David Rowe if you've got us in the commentary box, David.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep. So permission to drive granted, and you come along and you take your qualifying spot.
Yeah, that was. God, I tell you what. In free practice, I had to put some more laps in because everyone has just picked up the pace, and I thought, Christ, I don't think I'm going to make the top six here. So that was a result, really.
And early doors, the race kind of went your way and sort of let you settle in and relax a little bit. I'm sure it wasn't very peaceful, but nevertheless, it was quite comfortable, it seemed.
No, I had Andrew Parker just chasing me down, and I thought he is approaching rapidly, and I just had to talk to myself and get it together and just put some half-decent laps in, which, to be honest, weren't particularly good anyway, but it was enough.
Yeah. So well done, and you've got your position for next week sorted, so hopefully permission granted again, and then you can join us.
Thanks. Yeah, looking forward to it. I mean, this final is going to be mental. It's going to be bonkers.
It really is. I look forward to seeing you on the grid. Speak soon.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, and let's get Andrew in here. Andrew, have you got us in the commentary box?
Hey, Jeezy.
So, we think that you were just letting David sit there quite happily with that nice gap of 1.5 seconds. I think you had extra pace that you weren't showing us because you were protecting your position, right?
Well, interestingly, he said in the chat that I was catching him up, and it prompted me to say I think the worst thing I could have done was catch him.
Yeah, you must be pretty relieved. You're the storyline that eventually you've made it. Finally, you've made it, and quite justifiably so as well, I think, overall. But it must be nice to have just got it done.
I think, ironically, that was the hardest race for me to have qualified. I think I could have done it much easier in the other four had I got out of my own way.
Yes, I think that's a nice way of putting it. And today, none of that. You were just happily sat there and survived the melee at the beginning. I guess Arnell obviously not so lucky, and he's sort of seen the other side of that.
I think I might have had a part to play there. I was a tad tentative through the corkscrew, and I think it bunched him up a little bit and put him all a bit close. So I feel for Steve because he was my rear gunner.
Well, it is what it is. You are in the grand final. He's going to be sat watching it with everyone else, and that might be the best place. That might be the best seat in the house to be watching it rather than be in the middle of it, because it doesn't get any easier. But you must be looking forward to it. And
yeah, great. I think it's possibly one of the highest quality fields we're going to have in a single race if everyone turns up. So it should be pretty epic to watch.
Yeah, I can't wait. So good luck, and we'll see you next week.
Guys, thanks, Scott.
Alrighty, Scott. I think we'll call it at that point.
Yeah, it was quite interesting that Andy was mentioning that he was sort of catching him, but in terms of people's strategies and stuff. And it was actually intriguing also to hear David Rowe kind of back up what we were saying at the beginning in terms of those drivers coming in. We're going to find, an increased level of pace. And even David said it himself, the fact that he's someone who we regularly expect to be up towards the front, but it was almost a slight surprise to hear him say in some cases that he came in and saw the fact that everyone had raised their game. And he said he even had a thought to himself at one point, thinking, "I'm going to have to put some extra work in here because otherwise, there's no guarantee I'm going to make it through to the top 6." He didn't even initially think he would be in the top 6, but so the fact he's even had to dig deep and find even more just shows how much it's progressed. Particularly in the 4 seasons that we've done this, we're in this 4th season of doing it, and the rate of progression, particularly it seems to be particularly between seasons 3 and 4, we've seen it in this series and all the way through it. We've seen a substantial increase in not just the number of new drivers coming in, but also the enhancements that quite a few existing drivers have made to push themselves towards the front a bit more, to make it even more competitive field. So I think it's interesting with someone who's as quick as David Rose he's suggesting that he wasn't going to make it through. It surprises me in terms of it's a bit of a shock to hear him, but at the same time, if you see what I mean, it's not too much of a surprise because we've seen from the heats at least just how competitive the entire field has been from start to finish.
Yeah, Christian said the same thing. Christian Schurter said the same thing early in the season. He can't just turn up anymore and just expect to be on the pace. There are too many people that are putting in the time, putting in the practice, and just generally getting better at this sim racing thing that's going on, and overall getting better at racing. That's the whole point here, is that we're trying to support the drivers in getting ready for the new season, and certainly we've seen before that the drivers that do this sim racing get a leg up when the real action starts happening.
So let's just take a quick reminder of who is qualified. I know the top 6 off my hand, so I can add them into the top 12. So here's the top 12. So James Murphy, Christian Zaruta, Blair McConaughey, Jensen Hassler, Mark Bennett, Guy Crawford, Paul Fernhoff, Richard Gallagher, Chris Skillicorn, Alistair Gregg, Steve McMaster and Tom McEwing. And you can now add Jaroslav Cherney, Will Rossetti, David Rowe, Andy Parker, John Lang and James Fowler. That is your 18-car lineup for the grand final next week. And as we mentioned, it is at quite a circuit. If you've never seen Mont Tremblant before, it is one magical location in Canada, which has not only a fantastic circuit, but also an incredible place to race as well. I know that, Chris, from you telling me right at the beginning of the season, we talked about it. Mont Tremblant, you guys were doing some racing even just in between or before this season took place. You guys tried at Mont Tremblant. I think the majority of you guys, you said that you were just blown away with how much of a gem the circuit really was.
Yeah, it's great. It's got a bit of everything again. It's one of those tracks that's got a plenty of gradient. It's got some iconic corners, and it just promoted really good racing. So we're just hoping for more of the same. Quick apologies to Alistair Gregg for spelling his name wrong on that qualified list. I will correct that for next time.
I mean, it can be spelled with a D in there, so I suppose, but yeah, it's so I guess it's all sort of half right, I suppose. But either way, that's our 18 drivers sorted. So what's left for us to do is to say thanks to our sponsors and to go back into hiding for another week until we're ready for next week. Because of course, the caterhamracer.com America's Road Trip is sponsored by DPR Motorsport, your competitive advantage, by Design Display Structures. Immerse yourself in worlds beyond with bespoke projection screens, and by Just Add Lightness, high-performance LED lights and accessories for the Caterham 7. And we're also supported by Darren Burke, performance driver coach, and by FPZero Simulators. Please do go and check them all out, because they are some fantastic entities who are all supporting a very worthy, very valuable supporters of caterhamracer.com. So thank you to all of them for supporting us to get into the point where we are now. And so the scene is now set. In 7 days' time, this time in a week, we will know who has won the America's Road Trip at Mont Tremblant for the grand final. You do not want to miss it. It could arguably be our most competitive race and most competitive grid that we've ever had. It is practically unmissable. Join us at 8:30 next week for the grand final. It's going to be an absolute barnstormer. But until then, for myself and Chris, thanks for watching. Take care, stay safe, and we will see you next week with the all-important grand final. Mont Tremblant awaits for who can become the America's Road Trip champion. Join us then to find out. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.